anything else, a disclaimer is required for this or the beginning of any lore series regarding this universe. As you will discover while watching this video, the Elder Scrolls universe is a paradox-based non-linear multiverse disguised as a linear fantasy universe. As a result, many if not all interpretations of it are valid. Once the bones, through the generalized lore of the universe, form a proper skeleton, the flesh, comprised of aesthetic experiences and specific detail, become highly subjective. When I am studying a universe, I am doing so for my own later use of it in a tabletop campaign, as well as trying to capture the essence of its spirit. As such, I can only offer you my digestion of the lore, which, in line with the nature of this world, is only one of many unstable realities. Al-Brunik, Gof Akin. May savage ghosts guide you as we begin. Grimdark. Half off! At the genesis of all known things was Anu, the first of the two quintessential primordial progenitors of existence. Anu is stasis, order, and everything. His names are Atak, the Light, Satak, or Anhor. The second of the beings like this was Padomay, whose nature was opposite to Anu. Padomay is change. His names are Sithis, the Darkness, Akel, or Padomay. The interactions between these two entities resulted in the birth of creation itself, known as Nirn. Attractive enough to lure both Anu and Padomay to her, Nirn would choose Anu. Padomay would then seek to destroy Nirn, but she had already given birth to creation before being killed by her injuries. Anu, in response to this, would hide himself away after casting Padomay outside of time. It is here, at the beginning of all things, that two concepts must be understood: Kalpas, dragon breaks, and more importantly, what both of these concepts mean when being active at the same time. A dragon break is defined as a point in which linear time is broken and becomes nonlinear. By definition, Padomay being thrown outside of time is a rip in time, thus the first dragon break, by definition, truly occurred at creation. A Kalpa is the name given to a lifespan of a world or universe consisting of its beginning, middle, and end. While these are usually viewed as part of linear time, with the end of one Kalpa making room for the beginning of a new one, a non-linear reading is also possible. If creation itself is indeed a dragon break, then all Kalpas are happening both in a linear cyclical or 2D perspective, while also occurring in a non-linear multiverse or 3D perspective all at once. The Kalpa, in which the crustacean-like monstrosities known as the dregs ruled the slave oceans of the world, is happening while you are buying your own slaves in the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, only one universe over. At the same time, a version of those same events occurred in your universe 1 or 2 Kalpas ago. Understanding this is how we understand time as it plays into the various games. Both the interpretation of genuine sequels and multiverses are correct. This next concept is important for understanding the nature of gods in this universe, which is CHIM. CHIM has its equivalent concepts in different parts of the universe, with each being a different opinion on the meaning of attaining the same state. It is the full comprehension of the Elder Scrolls universe and one's place as a fictional character in it. This was part of the culture of the original races known as the Elnafey, who we will get to later in this video. It's important to remember that this state is not necessary to ascend to the heights of godhood, only the will of previously existing gods is. Martin Septim becomes the new incarnation of the dragon time god Akatosh at the end of the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. Both the current incarnations of Molag Bal, the Daedric Prince of Domination, and Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric Prince of Destruction, were born during the Kalpa, in which Dreg were the dominant life on Nirn. One person we know with CHIM who ascended to godhood was the hero of Gavach, also known as the player character, from the same game as the new Akatosh incarnation. At the end of the Shivering Isles DLC for Oblivion, the player character, whose actions are inherently informed by someone aware of the fictional nature of the universe, takes the place of Sheogorath to become the new Prince of Madness. The summary of divinity in CHIM is that mortals can become gods, and it is possible for a non-player character in the Elder Scrolls universe to realize that they are a fictional character, then come fully to terms with that reality, either finding inner peace from it, going insane from existential dread, or using this knowledge to attain something close to godhood. This is why I have always referred to Elder Scrolls as psychedelic fantasy. Self-awareness, meta-commentary, and sense of proportion as aspects of self-growth which lead to personal transformation are an inherent part of its DNA. All of this is doubled down on through the most common trope of the universe, which is the unreliable narrator, further giving explanations for lore conflicts through the subjectivity of those reporting it. If fantasy is an inherent part of your DNA, then you will probably enjoy the sponsor of this video, Ronin Kraft. Ronin Kraft is an independent 3D printing service that is known for its reliable ability to stay in touch with you as your order is being placed. The Elder Scrolls also has a tabletop game, and with Ronin expanding into fantasy from worlds like Warhammer 40k, you can be sure that you're getting a product that transcends any master. His links are below. We now return to the regularly scheduled creation of the universe. From Nirn came the Ouroboros, or universe. Here all the planes of reality exist. Every plane of oblivion, etherius, or magic, along with the plane that the mortal world, or Nirn, would one day exist in. In the Ouroboros were the rest of the gods, known as Et'ada. Among them would be created a being, often called the successor to Padomay, Lorcan, whose names are Shor, Creator Trickster, the Missing God, Doom Drum, or, most relevant for this subject, the Spirit of Nirn. Obsessed with destroying the status quo, Lorcan would earn the title of Trickster by deceiving many Et'ada into contributing to the creation of Mundus, which is the solar system of Nirn, the planet we all know today as the setting of the franchise. This process ripped much of their power from them, permanently putting them into different lesser states. The Et'ada who remained, but were in a weaker state, tricked into this, were known as Aedra, meaning ancestors. Those who realized how harmful the process of creating Nirn was and stopped ripping holes in Mundus are the Magna Gi, or Children of Magnus, led by their namesake, also called the Sorcerer King, who was the architect of the project. These holes in reality would form the stars and sun we know of today. The Daedra, meaning non-ancestors who rejected this process, would later go on to become the original incarnations of the Daedric princes we encounter by proving themselves through might against others of the same kind. These would be the predecessors to domination before Molag Bal and destruction before Mehrunes Dagon. The two Et'ada who chose to not abandon Mundus and tried to keep it alive were the more fauna-like beings known as Elnephe, or Earthbones, and the more flora-like Hist, or sentient trees. Using dragons as our example of Elnephe, there are reports of them coming from every corner of Nirn, and the Hist, while only existing in the province of Blackmarsh today, was once far more diverse in species existing all over the world. We can tell from this that there was likely a Pangea-like situation when Nirn was first created, allowing for this ease of travel. Among the Elnephe were the first Mer, or elves, and the first men. On Nirn, men and elves, on par with gods, did battle until the ground split apart, causing the various continents we know of today to be formed. At Mora as well as Roscria to the north, Yokuda as well as Thros to the west, Akavir to the east, Aldemaris as well as Pyandonia to the south, and in the middle of all of it, the diverse continent of Tamriel. On Tamriel, the Hist would survive, in the land later known as Blackmarsh, creating the lizard folk known as the Argonians to serve them as protectors, since being damaged in the clash between men and Mer previously mentioned, known as the Elnephe Wars. Eventually, the first men from all over the world would become the ancestors of the Redguards, Nords, and Imperials we know of today. The first elves would, through a series of magical disagreements and migrations, become the Dunmer, Dark Elves, Altmer, High Elves, and Bosmer, Wood Elves, along with several other types not mentioned here. Bretons would be a race of half-elven men born from the ritualistic use of human women in High Rock as sex slaves by a group of High Elves called the Dureni. And Orzimer, orcs, would come about as the result of a disagreement between the Daedric prince Trinimac and the Daedric prince Boethia. Khajiit, or the catfolk of Tamriel, are heavily theorized, though not confirmed, to have one of two origins. Either they were wood elves, altered over time into their current state, or they were merely beast folk, having a similar, though not the same relationship with the moons that Argonians do with the Hist. Whatever their origin, they are heavily morphologically different based on the moon phase they are born under. Some are quadrupeds, while others are bipeds. All the larger racial groups have an infinite amount of internal diversity, which makes them insanely interesting to study. There are seemingly a limitless number of different types of men or Mer on Nirn, while the subgroups of Argonians and Khajiit each constitute a respective species that could fill their own planet if they weren't so intimately connected. You'll notice at the beginning of this video, despite describing the nature of Padomay as being the opposite of Anu, I did not describe the being as chaos, only as change. This is because chaos is actually one of the words used to describe the Erebus, which is the universe. This world is inherently unstable, and nowhere in the lore is that better represented than in Daedrons. Daedrons take their name from the electrons, protons, and neutrons of our world. Daedrons are produced whenever anything like necromancy, conjuration, or anything involving the realms of oblivion happens in the mortal plane. While initially harmless, they can group together and form paradoxical rips in reality over time, usually affecting the planes of oblivion. The Daedric Prince Peryite, known as the Taskmaster, is responsible for destroying them. In the Elder Scrolls universe, your ability to make a place for yourself is more controlled by your own self-development, strength of will, and self-awareness than it is any kind of scientifically measurable process. This note is put here for the simple purpose of reminding the listener that this truly is a universe of paradoxes, kept together by very delicate relationships and wills which, as evidenced by things like dragon breaks, are very often disrupted in their own right. While the Elnathay may have diverted from their path as they became other things, both they and the Hist originally chose forms to keep Mundus alive, which was seemingly dying before their intervention. We know that Daedric princes are born from a Daedra being stronger than all those around them, so no one is forcing Peryite to clean up reality. If you're new to the lore, Peryite is often typecast as a lesser Daedra, but he's a Daedric prince, so that obviously doesn't add up. He does it because, for whatever reason, he sees it as his purpose. If not for that feeling of responsibility, something like the Oblivion Crisis times 1,000 would be happening every other day in every plane until this Kalpa came to a very swift, violent end. We also know that eventually it will. This Kalpa in this universe will come to a close, resulting in the coming of a new world with its own sentient races, magics, and interpretation of matter. Nothing is sure here, but you existing and the death of the universe. In between these 2 points are a million fun adventures for the player's character, simply called life from the in-universe perspective. One result of the volatile nature of the Erebus can be seen in the titular Elder Scrolls. They are able to tell what will happen in the future, know what has happened in the past, and are uncountable in number due to more disappearing or reappearing from reality. One could argue the Elder Scrolls are an objectified version of the concept of CHIM, as they are a lore bible for the Elder Scrolls universe hidden within the universe itself. They are old enough for the dragons themselves to have a word for them, that being Kiel. The various Elder Scrolls games take place in a rough 1,000-year time frame. This time frame starts in the middle of the Second Era with Elder Scrolls Online and ends in the middle of the Fourth with Skyrim. At minimum, the Empire of Men was formed over 500 years before this. Reading from an Elder Scroll causes a person to go blind over time in exchange for the knowledge they learn, which is a great metaphor for how a universe becomes less enticing as you know more about it. You become blind to the world of Nirn because you know too much about it. If you're reading about the lore, then you're not playing the game. To avoid this fate, the Dwemer, an extinct technologically advanced race of atheistic elves, created a mechanical device that puts the information into a three-dimensional lexicon. This lexicon could be thought of metaphorically as them finding a way to create their own Elder Scrolls game to avoid losing sight of playing. It's also a good metaphor for people being inspired by Elder Scrolls and making their own games. This could also be why the Dwemer don't exist anymore after activating their god, which is an artificial thing called the Numidium. One theory could be that they became the gods of a new universe. Regardless, it's obvious that the Elder Scrolls are indeed a metaphor for the Elder Scrolls. The last thing I want to talk about is an unofficial but referenced work in official materials such as Sermon 37 of the Lessons of Vivek. Vivek is the character most associated with the concept of CHIM we mentioned earlier. This work, by Michael Kirkbride, who is responsible for much of the lore, including the first 36 lessons of Vivek, is an exploration of science fantasy. Taking place in the unofficial 5th Era, this script for a graphic novel explores the end of the world and the nature of Elder Scrolls canon. Here, he champions the same ideas that anyone exploring the universe's lore likely would as well, chiefly that the universe is open for interpretation, rewriting, and is a collaborative effort between all those who participate in it. While the initial story itself is obsessively psychedelic, even seeing its own continuity as secondary to the meta-experience of it, this is its ending message. This is a world of Kalpas, which are happening both linear and non-linear, always interacting with each other despite being dramatically different, including having leftovers from the previous Kalpa subjective to that universe's timeline. The savage dregs you encounter are leftovers from the dregs who ruled the slave oceans, whether it's on the micro level of your player character or on the macro level of a homebrew version of the Elder Scrolls universe in your own Kalpa, which a tabletop game will take place in. The Elder Scrolls is a platform for creating your own stories and enjoying them. I wouldn't say that CODA makes it canon, but rather CODA's core message is a natural extrapolation of canon itself. The Elder Scrolls games mean nothing without their writers. Those writers mean nothing without their fans. Those fans often make quality stories that, through their entertainment value, become popular, and that popularity results in Bethesda, the company that makes the games, taking from those ideas, who then give them to their writers as a premise to work with. The cycle repeats itself, and if it goes well, you get a fun game. This game will have its own mechanics, variation of the lore, which creates conflicts, and if it's successful, it will be created with your actions towards fun in mind. There's a reason I don't often cover the Elder Scrolls universe. That's partially because it's very open to interpretation. There are a few finite rules, like mixed-race children always coming out as the mother's race, but other than that, the world really depends on what your favorite Elder Scrolls game is, and from there, the experience is your own. Daggerfall provides an immersive D&D-like experience. Morrowind unapologetically presents a glorious alien land with deep Lovecraftian elements. Oblivion is unintentionally hilarious due to its art style. Skyrim is a deeply cinematic, accessible experience, and while I might have my problems with Elder Scrolls Online, it does serve the purpose of being an ES title you can play with your friends. This is all to say nothing of the tabletop version of the game. Being into Elder Scrolls tells me about as much about a person as them being into D&D does. It's a very general statement with little explanation as to what they actually enjoy. Are they talking about the historical parallels of Skyrim or the deeply alien world of Morrowind? For this reason, anytime I cover this universe, it will always be from a general lore perspective. I hope you'll join me for future entries, because in line with the nature of this universe that we just spent this video exploring, you are the most important part about this universe. Thank you.